those as the main economies in the world, if every individual wants more and more material things, then of course there is going to be a big problem.
Coming to what Mahatma Gandhi said, taking from you, Mahatma Gandhi also said that we should live the world that we want to see. Now, this puts each human being in a place saying that we all have a responsibility of living that sustainable, simple lifestyle. And on the other hand, we are in a world where we are demanded to consume, which is given in a race of production based on greed and accumulation. A sector of this society are designing those conditions, those materials, those services, those products for rest of us in the world to be consumed and to live life beyond our own comprehension of what mindfulness is. How do we relate mindfulness to this group of designers? They could be constitutional designers, they could be product designers, they could be service designers, they could be social designers. How do we relate mindfulness to those people, a small group of people governing the minds and lives of a large group of people on earth?
Now, if we have to believe all the advertisements in the world that you really need the latest this and the latest that for you to be happy, then of course if we really follow those instructions from the advertisers and we really start feeling that we can't do without this latest model of a car or of a television or whatever, then of course you see we may be indeed trapped in the hands of those designers and advertising agencies and the producers of those products. But if we are mindful of what we really need, you see, just what I mentioned before, if you know your need without having any greed, whatever you may believe, then you can be free from that. You don't have to follow those advertisements. So there's a very strong influence of advertising in our lives, but we don't really have to follow it. Now, with political propaganda, also, if people are being influenced by political propaganda, or sometimes subliminal or otherwise some kind of campaigns, that we really feel that this is the right thing, but it may be ethically wrong, it could be economically unsound, it may be destroying the world, then we have to also think about this and whether we really can agree with that. If it is against reason, if it is against humanity, if it is against righteousness, then for instance, we can say no to these things. We don't have to.
Every designer, every producer is a consumer as well. So isn't he himself a victim of the world he or she is creating? And doesn't mindfulness apply to them to create a better world for themselves, their children as well?
Yes. But now, for instance, we can think of different forms of vacations, for instance. People have a need for recreation, and it doesn't always have to be going in a speedboat, or to a pleasure park or something like that. But it could be a nature walk, for instance, more eco-friendly destinations, for instance, and derive as much pleasure or maybe even more happiness out of such a holiday than those which are consuming a lot of goods and in the end feel tired and fattened by the experience and flattened by the experience. So it could be that our industries also could make money without creating the need or the greed for so much of material pleasures, so-called pleasures. So I think there's a vast field of opportunities where, one could think of different kinds of activities which may give more pleasure, more happiness. And now, for instance, in our Buddhist context, people could go on let's say, a 10-day meditation retreat practicing mindfulness instead of going on a holiday to Disneyland or someplace like that. Now, that is of course up to the people. You cannot force people to become, religious or spiritual or mindful or whatever. but it is just another option, and it seems more and more people are also
But doing
getting
all
into it.
these things, coming from different ends, different backgrounds, different mind thoughts, aren't we all trying to find happiness somewhere?
That's the point.
And if that is the case, if all people are trying to find that happiness, what are the simple guidelines that anyone can follow, irrespective of whether they are white, whether they are brown, whether they are black, whether they are yellow, or in what geographical part they come from? How can everybody try to find happiness on earth?
Well, there we have to, I suppose, distinguish between what is called worldly happiness and spiritual happiness. What is called worldly happiness is really depending on what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and even think. That worldly happiness depends on the input. Now, seeing beautiful things makes you happy. Hearing beautiful sounds, going to a nice concert makes you feel happy. Then having nice food also can make you happy. Tasting beautiful smells. Now this, the international flavor and fragrances, for instance, firms or Chanel or such perfume producers, they make billions of dollars just because of the nice smells that people want. Now we don't really need to overdo it, but there are people who have a big collection of all those expensive bottles, especially what the inside is maybe not so costly. The bottle is sometimes more expensive, but just to satisfy their sense of smell. And similar with all the other kind of senses, you see. Now that gives us a certain kind of happiness, but we could call it, according to the Buddhist point of view, also worldly happiness. Now there's nothing against worldly happiness. The only thing is that you can never satisfy the greed for worldly happiness. As long as the greed remains, there will always be some kind of dissatisfaction and some kind of unhappiness as a counterpart of this happiness. So what we call real happiness is something different, independent from satisfaction of
As an
senses.
individual, how far have you come in finding this eternal happiness in life?
It's a little bit hard to measure it on a scale, but I do find that I can do without a lot of things which I used to think that I needed. And I do know for sure that there is something called pure happiness, an independent kind of unalloyed happiness, peaceful happiness within myself, which if I want I can get in touch with daily, on a daily basis, on an hourly basis if necessary. And then a lot of other things which I used to crave for don't sort of come to my mind.
May I wish you all the success in finding your inner happiness in your walk of life, and may your walk of life create more happiness to rest of the people, including myself, as
I
a
wish
part
you-
of the world trying to find this happiness, and let the world be happy.
May all beings be well and happy.